I'm excited about these things. I love these investigations into um, Advaita, into the world of knowledge. It's so beautiful to see it so nicely mirrored in all the traditions. You go to the mystics in Christianity, like we've been going, and you just see it there everywhere. You go to the mystics in Islam, to Sufism, you see it clearly, straightforward there. The mystics in Buddhism, the mystics in Vedanta, it's like they're all sitting around the table having the same conversation. And it's just marvelous. This, I guess, who was it that shared it with me? This new mystic that I found that was shared from Romania, I think. He had no tradition of his own. He stumbled on it. Can you believe that? He stumbled on this and had an awakening. You know what type? I leave to him. I don't know. But he wrote these many pieces of prose on the experience, on his reality, on the new reality that he experiences, and they're so clear. His name is Chiaro, Ili Chiaro, which I don't know. So, but the book, yeah, Ili Chiaro is his Chiora, I guess maybe is his name, and his book is called The Silence of the Mind. And boy, you read that book and it seems so close that you could just almost just reach up and pick it. It just seems so imminent. His descriptions, he's very much like Eckhart Tolle in the things that he talks about, but he talks about them in a much more fluid and poetic way. His words really leave an essence behind as you hear them. It's quite intoxicating. And really, I love that sense that he sort of weaves the idea all the way through, that this is obvious and easy. There's just a small adjustment that you need to find inside, that's all. And then he tells you what that small adjustment is, and you realize it's just a matter of practice, a matter of breaking old habits, of having this dialogue going on in your mind that is your own personal dialogue. The dialogue of the universe that goes on spontaneously in the moment is your dialogue. That's the real you. But we superimpose this small dialogue that we have in our local mind, as he calls it. And our local mind is just full of reflections on things, ideas about things, worries about things, and all these little things that come up. And he says it's quite simple. All you have to do is cease, stop that. Just stop that, and let the world mind, let the universal mind be your mind, and just be there. He says that alone will burn up any ignorance that comes into its light. And what's startling is I suspect that it's true. Those moments that I can shut this bubblegum machine up upstairs. That seems to be true. There seems to be a great deal of light and sweetness just sitting there, just sitting pooled in a puddle in yourself, waiting for you to jump in it like a toddler. Not thinking of anything else, not having an opinion about anything, not ruminating about anything, just simply focusing on the awareness of isness, of being in this moment. So Buddhism is built all around this idea. So let's jump in here. We're on the chapter called Negative and Positive. Negative and positive. Avidya and vidya, maybe. Let's see. Big mind is something to express, not something to figure out. Oh, see there. There's an interesting clue. Did you catch that? Big mind is something to express. It's natural. It's what's there always within you, not something to figure out. So it's not one of your egoistic local mind cogitations. It's not an arrangement of thinking. It's not a series of thoughts. Big mind is something you have, not something to seek for. And so really this just implies there's nothing to do. So stop doing. You know, when you have your practice, stop doing. Which means don't try to accomplish, don't try to see something, don't try to quiet something, don't try anything. Stop the noise. Stop thinking that you have anything to do. Stop thinking that you can do anything. Just accept everything as it is. Open the mind. Turn everything into an ear. Listen passively with everything that you are. And that's where it lies. There's nothing to do. There's nothing to go get, nothing to achieve. Just stop doing. Stop thinking that you're in the wrong place. Stop imagining that you don't know something. Stop being concerned that you're impure, that you're unable, that you're weak, that you're old, that you're young, that you don't know something, that you need more time. Let go of all those lies in the mind. Stop listening to the mind. Just watch. Watch with all of your senses. Turn them all on to this moment and imagine nothing. The more you understand our thinking, the more you find it difficult to talk about it. Exactly, because the talking is the veil. The talking is the ego. The having an opinion about the thing is an ego. The purpose of my talking is to give you some idea of our way, but actually it is not something to talk about, but something to practice. You know, that practicing, just practice isness. The practice is to keep the noise from crowding in around the edges. You know, you set up that silent space, and then you start wondering about what is that I'm smelling? You know, oh, what was that thought? That was an interesting thought. You know, oh my gosh, you're right. I've got an appointment in 40 minutes. Oh, I have to get up and get ready. You know, it's letting all these little things that just sort of slip in. And the slipping in isn't so much the problem. The problem is that the slipping in disturbs you. You resist it. And so you get involved with it. You grab onto the idea. You identify with it. And when you put that sense of I to it, when you own it, it comes to life for you. It blossoms into an experience, into a worry, into an inspiration, into whatever. But whatever it blossoms into is blocking your view of the real. So he's saying that, you know, even though right now, Lord knows I can talk about things, but he said this isn't really something we talk about because it exists before talking. It exists without talking. It exists spontaneously. The best way is just to practice without saying anything. When we talk about our way, there is apt to be some misunderstanding because the true way always has at least two sides, the negative and the positive. When we talk about the negative side, the positive side is missing. And when we talk about the positive side, the negative side is missing. We cannot speak in a positive and a negative way at the same time, so we do not know what to say. It is almost impossible to talk about Buddhism. So not to say anything, just to practice it, is the best way. Showing one finger or drawing a round circle may be the way, or simply to bow. So there's a big clue here. And if I took it, I would shut up. He's saying, you're not going to talk your way there. You're not going to learn your way there. There's nothing, there's nowhere to go. And so really, it's not a matter of about listening to one more lecture to figure out one more Sanskritic term that will give you one more clue to this complicated, coded puzzle of the mind. He said, no, that's not what's going on here. What's going on here is you already have it. We don't need to talk about it. If you talk about things, you only can talk about partial things. You can never talk about the wholeness. You can never include the wholeness in your sentence. You know, you always, language by nature, by necessity, is only a part of something. It's a conversation about something. and all the tools are about pieces. You cannot, like he says, bring the whole in at the same time. And so even as we talk here, we're walking around an elephant, talking a bit about its ear, a bit about its foot, a bit about its trunk, a bit about its tail. But each time that I talk about a tail, I'm not talking about the trunk. And if I'm talking about the eyes, I'm not talking about the feet. And so you see, we can never get a working picture by thinking about it, by talking about it. We have to stop focusing on parts and their interest as pieces and step back and turn ourselves into an all-perceiving self and see the whole elephant simultaneously. And then what is there to say? You have the whole. So he's saying that it's more effective showing one finger, that in this truth right here, the showing of one finger, lies all of the secret. Drawing a circle, the symbol of enlightenment in Buddhism, the one without a second, the thing that has no beginning and no end, the representative of the eternal, that circle, or just bow. Bowing is what we're doing. Bowing is what? Bowing is humility. Bowing is greeting. Bowing is surrender. So he's giving us clues here that this is something that is present with you right now. You don't have to wait till the end of the lecture to understand this. It is your world right now. Just stop with the noise that defines it as being something. Stop with the noise that says you need something, that something is imperfect, that something is astray, that something isn't ready. Set all of that aside. Let nothing come up and just enjoy your nature. You'll find your nature to be Satchitananda, but why call it that? Just pay attention to it. Enjoy it as it is. It is enough. Love needs nothing. Love is the eternal that we seek, and this moment is in fact love. So see it as such. If we understand this point, we will understand how to talk about Buddhism, but we will have perfect communication. To talk about something will be one of its practices, and to listen to the talk will also be practice. When we practice Zazen, we just practice Zazen without any gaining idea. When we talk about something, we just talk about something, just the positive or the negative side, without trying to express some intellectual one-sided idea. And we listen without trying to figure out some intellectual understanding, without trying to understand from just a one-sided view. This is how we talk about our teaching and how we listen to a talk. What he's saying here is that you remain open the whole time. Usually when we hear something that we agree with or that is truth, we complete the cycle. We close it off a little bit. We're like, yes, that's that thought, that's that idea. And we put it in its place in our relative mind and keep going. And we find another truth. Oh yeah, I like that one too. And we pick it and we put it in that other component. But you see, when you hear a truth, you say, oh yes, that's true. And then you pick it up and you put it in your relative box in there. It's lost its power. Because the whole attention that you've given it by putting it in its box has removed you from the reality of it in the moment. So now you're looking at a thought that you've arranged in your mind rather than the isness of the thing itself. So that's why we are so careful or wanting to silence this mind, because paying attention to what's in the mind removes us a degree from reality, removes us from our knowledge of the divine. We focus on something, on some particular, and we identify with it, and it becomes our world. It colors the way we see and the way we live. And we actually, many of us, unfortunately, get stuck up there. So we have a constant flow of thought about everything. That is ego. It is synonymous with ego. That noise of the mind is your ego. You have to surrender that. And that is that whole self-abnegation, because to surrender that, you're surrendering your whole right to think about the world, to create the world you live in, to have ideas about the world you live in. You surrender your personality, the way you look at things, the way you talk about things. You surrender all these little things, these little nuggets of enjoyment that we have, these subtle things that we enjoy about egoism, about separation. We enjoy our smartness, we enjoy our cleverness, we enjoy our wit, we enjoy whatever it is we're enjoying. This is the ego. And that whole enjoying process, to enjoy something, you enjoy it in the mind. It's the mind that conjures these waves of enjoyment, these ups and downs. Enjoyment is only there when behind it is the lull of suffering. So by indulging in enjoyments, you by necessity will indulge also in suffering. And we ignore one and we celebrate the other. We endure one and jump into the other. And this riding of the mental bike, it is the whole problem. That's the only problem. Because those thoughts in your unique mind, in your personal mind, are the things that you use to maintain a sense of separation, a sense of disconnection. Because by using mind, you can only focus on one little thing at a time. You don't see the whole. You're always talking about the tail or the foot or the ear. The Soto way always has double meaning, positive and negative. And our way is both Hinayanistic and Mahayanistic. I always say our practice is very Hinayanistic. Actually, we have Hinayana practice with Mahayana spirit, rigid formal practice with informal mind. Although our practice looks very formal, our minds are not formal. Although we practice Zazen every morning in the same way, that is no reason to call this formal practice. It is your discrimination which makes it formal or informal. Inside the practice itself, there is no formal or informal. If you have Mahayana mind, something which people call formal may be informal. So we say that observing the precepts in the Hinayana way, is violating the precepts in a Mahayana way. If you observe our precepts in just a formal way, you lose your Mahayana spirit. Before you understand this point, you always have a problem, whether you should observe our way literally, or whether you should not concern yourself about the formality which we have. But if you understand our way completely, there is no such problem, because whatever you do is practice. As long as you have Mahayana mind, there is no Mahayana or Hinayana practice. Even though it seems as if you are violating the precepts, you are actually observing them in their true sense. The point is, whether you have a big mind or a small mind, in short, when you do everything without thinking about whether it is good or bad, and when you do something with your whole mind and whole body, then that is our way. Because it's the ego that breaks everything in little pieces, right? So when you do something with your whole body, you're not doing it with a portion of your body. It's being done with full attention. Full attention is what makes it your whole body. Full awareness, listening. When you're doing, you're excluding. When you're thinking, you're excluding. Because you're only thinking about that thing that you're thinking of, and you're only aware of that thing that you're working with. So it narrows your perspective, it narrows your experience. And that's where the ego is born. Anytime there's dividing, anytime there's separation, there is ego, right? Which a good way to use that, the way I use that, is when I start getting annoyed by somebody or something. I always say the little sentence to myself. This is my little trick. I said, oh, who is there to annoy and who is there to be annoyed? So I always ask both sides of the question. Who is there to annoy and who is there to be annoyed? Only egos are annoyed. So when you're getting annoyed, why are you getting annoyed? Because, to violate Buddhism and bring in our beloved Divine Mother, you'll say, well, that Mother is pointing at the boundary of your ego. She's bringing your attention to where your ego begins so that you can undo it, so that you can surrender it to her right then and there. That's why you're being annoyed. You're not being annoyed because that guy's driving too slow in the fast lane. You're being annoyed because you've got an ego and Mother's bringing your attention to it. And when you bring your attention to an ego, it's always annoyance. That's all there is in having an ego, constant annoyance. So these things, when you get angry, why are you getting angry? It's not because that person just cut you off in traffic. You're getting angry because you have an ego, and Mother is putting her finger on it at that moment to show it to you, to give you an opportunity to undo it, to let go of it, to surrender it to her. So you see, when we get caught in ego, we have reasons for all of our moods, but there's one reason for our mood, and that is Mother laying her finger on something that needs to break for you to be free. Not because anything else that your mind has assigned to its purpose or its reason or its cause or its effect. We experience these things because Mother cares, because Mother loves. And when she finds those things in you that are destroying you, that are distorting your freedom, she'll put her finger on it. And when she puts her finger on it, you feel it. You become aware of it. And at that point, you get a choice. You can turn to her and say, wow, thanks for touching that. I surrender it to you. Show me how to do that. let me let it go. And you move on. If you're stuck in ego, you'll spend a good half an hour coming up with unique names for that person in the car in front of you that cut you off. And when you get to the office, you'll still be tisking as you walk in a hurry, late because of that idiot in front of you in traffic that wouldn't let you by. And it goes on, and you see how it just continues to feed. And at the end of the day, we've got this giant ball that's rolling behind us, stressing us out, because we didn't let go of the first little snowball before we rolled it down the hill. If we had just let it go, it would have become big, but it would have rolled down the hill. We wouldn't have cared. But ego is when you roll that snowman ball and you don't let go of the ball and you become part of the snowman. All right, maybe not. But anyway, that's our trouble. This egoism and this story that goes on in the mind all the time. And it's not that we have to stop it, right? It's not that you have to get all worked up because you can't shut your mind up. It's that you just need to stop being bothered by it. So what? The mind is noisy. Just watch it. Watch the nonsense of what flows through there. Sit there with the Divine Mother and laugh your head off at the nonsense that your mind comes up with in 30 seconds. Enjoy the noise. That's what it is to accept the moment. You accept your perfections and your imperfections without calling them either. You just accept isness. This is me. This is that. This is all. This is together. Oh, look at that. Oh, look at that. Oh, look at that. You watch it and let it go. You don't analyze it. You don't worry about it. You don't get bothered by it. You don't get annoyed. You don't use it even to start thinking, oh, I should be such a better person. Oh, I should be so much nicer. Oh, I should call my mother more often. We don't use it like that. We accept the moment as it is. We see it, we watch it, we let it go. And in that, the self is experienced. You become aware of that which is always present in the moment when the mind is not allowed to bother you. And in that is your freedom. In that is love. In that is eternity. Dogen Zenji said, when you say something to someone, he may not accept it, but do not try to make him understand it intellectually. Okay, that's that whole thing. Don't make the problem. Somebody doesn't accept it, don't argue. Do not argue with him. Just listen to his objections until he himself finds something wrong with them. This is very interesting. Try not to force your idea on someone, but rather think about it with him. If you feel you have won the discussion, that also is the wrong attitude. Try not to win in an argument, just listen to it. But it is also wrong to behave as if you had lost. Usually when we say something, we are apt to try to sell our teaching or to force our idea. But between Zen students, there is no special purpose in speaking or in listening. Sometimes we listen, sometimes we talk. That is all. It is like a greeting. Good morning. Through this kind of communication, we can develop our way. Well, what's he talking about there? He's talking about talking without identity, without attaching yourself to what's being said, right? If you're teaching and you feel the need to convince somebody, then you have an egoistic idea about your knowledge, and chances are it's not going to be effective. But if you say something and the person disagrees with it, instead of becoming incensed because he dared to question your knowledge as a teacher, or your knowledge that you've spent all of this time practicing on, or how many books you've read in your life over this particular topic, do you see all the reasons that you might get annoyed? And what are they? They're all ornaments of ego, right? You get annoyed because somebody has violated all of your effort. Well, that means all of your effort was done with a gaining idea. And now it's come back to bite you as an ego. That's why we're told to practice without a gaining idea. We read a book without any gaining idea. We read it in the moment. We hear what it says. We let it lie within us. And there's a great point in one of the poems I read by Illy this morning. He says that if you hear something that's wrong, it just washes through you. It doesn't do anything. Just let it go through you. When you hear something true, you will be changed by it. You'll be transformed by it. But pay also no attention to that. Let it go through. Let everything go through. Vivekananda Ramakrishna Swami Prabhupada. How's that for an order of thinking? So we've gone from Ramakrishna to Prabhupada, and he says that, when we oh, now I forgot what I was going to talk about. Oh boy. I'm growing old in front of you. All right. It was something I had already said, so it's not a big loss. All right, so he says, do not argue with him. Just listen to his objections until he himself finds something wrong with them. This is very interesting. Try not to force your idea on someone, but rather think about it with him. This is that notion of I always talk about how as Vedantists, it's not ours to argue and win. It's ours to learn how to sit next to somebody and view the world from where they're standing. It's ours to understand others, that we open our heart to them and listen. And when we've truly listened to them, when we've truly respected what they've thought and what they've said and how they arrived at it, because we know that they too are a seeking self, we know that they too are a manifestation of Divine Mother. When they feel that respect from us, when they feel that lack of resistance from us, when they're able to speak their mind and their idea clearly, then their own ego is not provoked. And then the two of you can truly have a together moment where you both take a step forward together. You've learned something together, not because either of you has been taught necessarily, but because there's been no resistance and your natures are able to come through. The ego is not invoked, right? And you learn. You have a fresh moment. You have a real moment. And you've changed, and you keep going forward. So try not to force your idea on someone, but rather think about it with him. If you feel you have won the discussion, that is also the wrong attitude, even if you're right. Because somebody has to be right and somebody has to be wrong. And while it doesn't matter who is who, what matters is the fact that you've allowed the ego to draw division, to draw separation. That's what's the problem. Try not to win the argument, just listen to it. But it is also wrong to behave as if you had lost. So it's not humility, right? Calculated reactions or actions, calculated behaviors are never what they seem. That's why we want to get out of our mind. The mind will calculate humility. The mind will calculate kindness. The mind will calculate generosity. But if the mind is calculating it, it is ego-centered, which means that you're keeping track of it. You have a gaining idea, and you're going to protect it because you earned it, and now you're in trouble. So we don't want that. We want this continual openness, this continual hearing, this continual presence, always. No idea of our own. There is no our own here to have an idea. So we don't bother with ideas. We let them rise, we let them fall. You won't become stupid, you'll become wise. You won't become thoughtless, you'll become able to think anything. You'll be able to see anything. And things will be apparent to you. If a statement is made, you will know if you are in this state of, we could call it flow, since that's the modern word for it. In that state of flow, you know truth implicitly. Why? Because you are truth implicitly. And you've shut off the noise of mind, which is always partially correct, but never able to see the whole. Right? See the difference? Usually when we say something, we are apt to try to sell our teaching or to force an idea. Right? Selling and forcing, both verbs of doership. So again, it's just that notion of being the doer with a sense of gaining. That's the problem. But between Zen students, there is no special purpose in speaking or in listening. Sometimes we listen, sometimes we talk. That's all. It is like a greeting. Good morning. Through this kind of communication, we can develop our way. Not to say anything may be very good, but there is no reason why we should always be silent. Whatever you do, even including not doing, that is our practice. That is an expression of big mind, right? Big mind is what you hear when you surrender little mind. Big mind is what moves you when you let go of your personal mind. That is why Thakur described himself as a hole through which God can be seen, because big mind moved him alone. There was no small mind moving Thakur, moving Sri Ramakrishna. There was no personality called Ramakrishna in the room. We only think that because we think of ourselves that way. When Ramakrishna had his realization in the temple with Kali that day, there was no longer a Ramakrishna there. It was only our ignorance that continued to call him Ramakrishna, because we saw a body. And we identify ourselves with the body, so we assume Ramakrishna was his body. We know we associate ourselves with personality, so we associate Ramakrishna with a personality. But Ramakrishna was no longer there after that realization. There was no personality there. There was the divine presence, and the divine presence alone. There was no small whirlpool of thinking anymore within that body that identified itself as Ramakrishna, right? But we in our ignorance continued to see him as Ramakrishna. That's the difference between seeing a person and seeing God. And so we ourselves work toward that. Well, that makes it all a gaining idea. We ourselves are all that. We also are that hole through which the divine shows. But our hole has a grating in it called ego, which won't let everything through in equal measure. It's always measuring love. It's always measuring wisdom. It's always measuring effect and cause. And so we think and release our love and our expression accordingly, because we're not free. But to be in big mind alone is to be free. And we can manifest our wholeness, our stability, our security, our equanimity, our love, our compassion, and all of those things appear when the mind disappears, when the local use of mind disappears. See? So, big mind is something to express, but it is not something to figure out because it's isness. It's isness. You know, the thing is that you can tell the difference between God knowledge and worldly knowledge or human knowledge, secular knowledge, because secular knowledge, you have to go retrieve it. You have to go to the mind and remember, oh, what is that person's name? You know, which I can tell you there's a deep worn path looking for someone's name in my mind, but that's the problem of worldly knowledge is it never happens in the moment. It's always something you have to go retrieve, something you have to go remember. You see, the knowledge that becomes this big mind knowledge, what becomes available to us in the silence of ego, when the ego is silenced, what becomes available is spontaneous knowledge. You don't have to go inquire. You don't have to go get. It's part of your isness. It's the wisdom of your Satchitananda, right? And it's the bliss of your Satchitananda, which has the same quality. The bliss of the self, you don't have to go and retrieve it. You don't have to go collect reasons for it to generate, because it simply is. It's a blissfulness of contentment. It's a song of the presence of God, the presence of the divine. And it's always there, behind the noise of the mind. So turn that volume down, and it's yours. You don't have to go get it. So big mind is something to express, but it is not something to figure out. Big mind is something you have, not something to seek for. Big mind is something to talk about or to express by our activity, or something to enjoy. If we do this in our way of observing precepts, there is no Hinayana way or Mahayana way. Only because you seek to gain something through rigid formal practice does it become a problem for you. This is a really big, huge, troublesome point, because how often, you know, we're sitting, I really have to say how much of my spiritual practice has been done with this kind of gaining idea. Oh, I'm going to do this and I'll be something better. I'll be something newer. I'll be something different. I'll gain after some magic amount of spiritual practice, I'll have my enlightenment. We associate it with a goal. We associate it with an acquisition. The whole process is wrong. The whole process is leading us, just letting us, I don't know that it's leading us further in there. There's certainly vidya, there's light there that's bringing us out of darkness slowly, even if you're doing it incorrectly. But the real problem, the real thing is to sit there in the moment. Don't go get the moment. Sit in the moment. Be present. Enjoy all that you have in this moment. Become aware of all that you have, because most of us, we're discontent because we've forgotten how amazingly exciting and beautiful this experience of isness is. We've whittled it down to a little box of boredom. We've become completely unaware of the mystery of existence. And so part of our practice is just to become aware. Remember this beauty of even if you're sitting in your room bored with absolutely nothing to do and no money to change it, you're still sitting in a place of infinite beauty. You're still sitting in a place of infinite depth. Freedom lies where you sit. Become aware of these things. Open these boxes again. Breathe and feel it and walk around with them under you, you know, building you. It's what life is supposed to be. You know, look at Thakur, look at that life. There is really nothing extraordinary about the life when you sit there and look at the day-to-day of it. He was a temple priest. He lived in a small town in India. There was nothing significant about it. The temple was an okay temple, accepted by some, rejected by many. It was just another temple on the river. How many temples are on the river right there within a mile of Dakshineshwar? How many of them can you count? There was nothing special. So what made it special? What made it wonderful? What made it beautiful? The presence of God that he reminded everybody of all the time. That's what made Dakshineshwar the destination for pilgrims. That's what made an temple lined up on the river with other temples. That's what made it amazing. You should be greatly encouraged in that. That means you, as an temple, are beautiful. You, as an temple, are amazing. And if you accept that, if you open to that, if you let it be without any conversation in the mind whatsoever, it is your place of pilgrimage. And they quite possibly, it will become a place of other people's pilgrimage. People will want to talk to you. They'll want to know you. They'll want to see you. They'll want to hear you. And that is because God is, and because the ego is diminishing. So that's why he says, only because you seek to gain something. When you seek to gain something, there's a whole bunch implied in that. One is that you're missing something. Two is that you're something material that can be added to or taken away from. You see all these wrong ideas that underline that? They assume that you can fix it, that you can be the one that gains something. So it is the idea of doership in there. And what it exactly is that's missing and what has to be gained is a determination of the ego. And the ego will have to reference the mind, all of its little disparate pieces in there, to come up with an idea of what's missing. What's missing is the light of the presence, because the ego is shading it from you. But if we appreciate whatever problem we have as an expression of big mind, it's not a problem anymore. Because we're not thinking as a body mind. We're then thinking as divine self, as Atman, which means we're not thinking, we're accepting, we're open. Any cognition is in the moment. Sometimes our problem is that big mind is very complicated. Sometimes big mind is too simple to figure out. That is also big mind. But because you try to figure out what it is, because you want to simplify the complicated big mind, it becomes a problem for you. So whether you have a problem in your life or not depends upon your own attitude, your own understanding. You see that little trick that just happened? All of your problems are your own fault. Right? Because there's no problem until you define it as a problem. That's one of the interesting things that Eckhart Tolle says. He says in the moment there are no problems. There are only obstacles, and they come at you one at a time. So when you bring your mind down to the moment, when you silence the noise and gibberish of all of those other things going on, to what's in front of you, it's not a problem. Because to become a problem, it has to fall into a longer and higher definition. You have to bring in a past, and you have to bring in a future, and you have to bring in a goal, and you have to bring in a requirement and an expectation, and all of these things that are egoistic. That's what creates a problem. But in the moment, it's just a thing. And you accept it, and you do what is required in response to it as an expression of Satchitananda, and you move on. It's done. It's finished. That's all you have the power for. There is nothing else. This singular moment, continuous, endless, beginningless, is all that there is. You're always here. And your problem doesn't exist here. This is the ultimate place of solution. Right? All things become right in the awareness of moment, in the awareness of isness, when we surrender ego. It's the story that creates problems, the plots that we create in our mind, that create expectation, right? That create desires. And when those desires go unanswered or unfulfilled, then comes suffering, then comes anger, and all of those things. And suddenly we're dancing with a very, very ugly person called ego instead of dancing with the divine, you know. I used to have that experience. There was a, just to tell an illegal story about before I joined the monastery. I used to go ballroom dancing up at the Starlight Rooftop Dancing in San Francisco. And of course, I was the only person under 80 at a rooftop, at a Starlight dancing room. But I'd be up there dancing with my friend, can't remember her name at this point. Anyway, she looked like Greta Garbo. She was quite beautiful. And we'd get up there and we'd be dancing, and it wouldn't be like 10 seconds before some grizzly old man would bump into me and he would say snowball. Well, in a formal a ballroom dance situation, snowball means you switch partners. So he would give me his lovely, beautiful 85-year-old wife, and I would let go of this hideous young woman that I was dancing with. And then I would have to hobble around the dance floor the rest of my evening, until the dance was finished and I could go retrieve Snowball and, maybe have 10 seconds of the next dance with her. And so you see the problem in life. This is what we are doing. We are dancing in this grand ballroom with the beloved, and ego keeps coming up. This grizzled old man with a terrible wife bumps into you and says snowball, and you suddenly are attached, to that ego, and you're dancing with this divine grizzled old woman, which remember, if you're offended by any of this, it's just your ego. That if any of this bothers you, it's purely your fault, not my responsibility at all. So, but this notion of ego is a big problem for us. And it does slip in that easily and that expectedly. And we spend our day dancing with it, which is a miserable. Even when it's fun, it's miserable, because that fun is going to end and it's going to leave you in delusion, because you've become accustomed to fun. You've become accustomed to enjoyment. And so when it's not there, you feel the absence, you feel the hunger, you feel the loneliness, because you've danced with ego. If you dance with the divine, there's nothing but bliss. That's all there ever is. It's not the bliss of enjoyment. It's the bliss of contentment. It doesn't need maintenance. It doesn't need anything. It is what you are and who you are. And it is very quiet, and it is very peaceful. It is very gentle. It is silent. And it simply will not exert itself to a volume louder than your ego does. So it's up to you to listen for it. It's up to you to relax into it, to be it as it is. So if we appreciate whatever problem we have as an expression of big mind, it is not a problem anymore. Sometimes our problem is that big mind is very complicated. Sometimes big mind is too simple to figure out. That is also big mind. But because you try to figure out what it is, because you want to simplify the complicated big mind, it becomes a problem for you, right? Instead of accepting it as perfect, you've defined it as a problem that needs change. Now you're involved as doer. To be the doer, you need the ego. So you go and get that hideous ego off of the shelf and you bring it into your life again. So whether you have a problem in your life or not depends upon your own attitude, your own understanding. Because of the double or paradoxical nature of truth, there should be no problem of understanding if you have big Mahayana mind. This kind of mind will be obtained by true Zazen, by true practice. So this big mind is what you already have. The big mind is where we live. And it is the localized mind, the small mind, that we have to surrender in order to become aware of and to be able to hear big mind. right? So that ego of small mind, your local mind and ego are synonymous. Surrender of ego means the surrender of your personal thought, your personal ideas. And to surrender those doesn't mean that they stop necessarily right away, but your interest in them stops, right? Your attention to them stops. They rise and they fall. It doesn't matter. You go forward. You are part of that established self, which is unchanged by them. Right? You're part of that established self where there is no change. You're part of the identity of self with the capital S. So you know there's nothing that can be added to yourself. So you stop trying to add things to yourself. You know that there is nothing that can be taken from yourself. So you stop defending yourself. And you become open, and you become attentive. Being open and being attentive manifests wisdom, your nature. All right. Any questions, concerns, any confusing part of Big Mind that we now need to fix?
Did you want to put that poetry book in the chat?
Yes, I will do that. Let me, I'm probably the only person in the world that has to move my camera to find my buttons here. Let's see. Okay. All
Thank you for a wonderful class again.
Personally. Thanks for having me figure out how to use chat again. I don't know why it's doing this. Just a second. All right, Ilie, I-L-I-E. Silence of mind. All right, there it is. That's the name of the book. And actually, Bindu was the one that recommended it. C-I-O-R, C-I-O-A-R. Oh, it's an A at the end. C-I-A-R. I think something like that. Anyway, you'll find it. It is. It's there's also a nun online that she's a Buddhist nun, and she reads them as a guided meditation. So it's quite wonderful. Bindu sent me that address, which I didn't keep, so I don't have it right now. But if you like that kind of thing, she has a very calming voice, and she reads it slow at long intervals, so you can meditate to it quite nicely. A kind of a guided meditation. What's that?
Who's Bindu?
Bindu comes to our classes quite frequently. She sent me an email with all of this in at one time.
Got it.
So. Yeah, the blurb on the book read, it's a poetic Eckhart Tolle. Is how it was described. And it is. But you know, that's the beautiful and amazing thing to me. It's part of what I'm really, really excited about these days is how lovely it is to grow so comfortable with scripture from anywhere. You know, to be able to pick up a Buddhist book and understand it, to be able to pick up a Christian book and understand it, to be able to pick up a Sufi book and understand it. This is where we are. This is what Vedanta is. You know, this removal of ego breaks all of those divisions up, and then access to that big mind, to that self. We can hear the singing in all of these scriptures and all of these different ways of saying the same thing. You know, we can hear it inside. And so you sit and you read these scriptures and you realize, wow, all of this division and all of this fighting and all of this separation and all of this definition of these dogmas and creeds and doctrines, unnecessary. Quiet the mind and they all become one. You know, quiet the ego and they all become the ladder to life. They all pluck that beautiful song inside, the Bhagavad Gita, the song of God, which is you. It's not a book. You are the song of God. The Bhagavad Gita is you. The Bhagavad Gita as a book is just a well-tuned you. So know that. Become the scripture and you hear them everywhere. Become the scripture in your daily life becomes teaching. Everything that comes at you in life becomes a touch of mother. The learning never stops. The unfolding never stops. The opening never stops. You are infinite after all. So your growth, your expansion will be infinite. There is no end to it. It's a beautiful thing. So, all right. Jai Ma, Jai Thakur, Jai Swamiji, Jai Jesus, Jai Buddha, Jai Chaitanya, Jai Rama, Jai Krishna. Jai. Like even St. Paul, when he was in Rome, walked by an idol that said, "To the unknown God." And so I think of Thakur when he was on that wagon riding across that field at night, and those dacoits were coming toward him. And he said, I took the name of all the gods I could think of. I didn't want to miss the right one. What a wonderful, playful ideal he had. Just, you know, he didn't have to worry because of the love that he had for Mother. He didn't have to worry about that offense or that being patronizing or being presumptuous. He didn't have that problem because he just loved. And it's just so wonderful to read in the gospel, which is one of the reasons it comes alive so well, is he's not walking on eggshells. He's just dancing through Mother. He's just whirling and twirling. You know, if he knocks something over, it's beautiful. If he trips over something, it's gorgeous. You know, it's just because he is the one who is love itself. You know, and this is life. This is where we're going. At the beginning, we have to have all these rules and all these commitments and all this discipline and all this exercise, but it's because we're children. You know, we're still learning to wobble. But where we're going, what we are, and as we arrive at where we are, when we as we arrive here, you know, each of us becomes a blessing. Each of you just sitting there is a blessing. Right? Vivekananda says, someone who sits and thinks of God does more for the world than 10,000 do-gooders. Just sit there putting out that sense, that beautiful, beautiful, beautiful sense of peace that is your Mother. To live in that space, everyone that touches you that day will be blessed. So be that today. All right.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you.
Be well.
You too. Thank you.
Yes, indeed.